In this video, I'm going to talk about why I think most supplements are overrated and what some of the problems and potential harms are from using any old supplement. And I'll also switch gears and talk about some of the ones that I think are worthwhile, some of the ones that I use and that I think are beneficial and worthwhile and that may possibly be worthwhile for you as well. I went a lot more in depth on this topic on my podcast, so I'll put a link to that episode in case you want to get more details or more context about that. So first off, it's worth mentioning that food should be the top priority when it comes to nutrition. You can get most of the nutrients you need from food, and food actually, when you get nutrients from food, the nutrients usually work better, they function better, because they're coming with other things that are also in the food, and that's what your body's used to. That's how you evolved. That's, how we're used to digesting those things. And so if you take a whole bunch of an isolated nutrient, it doesn't always work as well. And then there are a few other issues with like the supplement industry and so forth. There's a lot of money in it. So of course they're always motivated to market it like crazy, these different supplements, but there's pretty poor quality control. So a lot of supplements may not have what they advertise. If they advertise this much of a nutrient, they might have this much, or they might have a bunch of other contaminants, like something that might increase your risk of cancer or some other, problematic ingredient that it accidentally gets in there, like mercury or lead or whatever. So those things are not uncommon when it comes to supplements. So really what you want to do is you want to be very selective and stick with very reputable, reliable brands or specific products that have been third-party tested by somebody like Consumer Labs, which does specific tests to see do they have the ingredients and do they have the other contaminants and things like that. So the stuff I'm sharing today mostly falls under that umbrella of things that have either been tested or come from very reliable brands. So the vast majority of supplements you probably don't need, but here are a few that I do use and why. And I'll put a list of these. I'll put a link to a list of these in the description below in case you want to check that out. And by the way, of course, which ones are worthwhile for whom, that'll vary a lot depending on your individual circumstances. So always keep that in mind and talk to your own doctor and everything. But let's go ahead and get into the list. So the first one is vitamin D. A lot of people are deficient in vitamin D, and it seems like if you're deficient, that's just a bad sign for your health and that you're at a higher risk of dying and so forth, and things just don't work as well in your body if you don't have enough of the vitamin D. So it's not that you need to have like some crazy mega level of it, it's that you mainly just don't want to be deficient or maybe just a little higher than what they consider the lower end of normal. So for that reason, I take some vitamin D each day. Also because skin cancer runs in my family, maybe you can tell I'm kind of freckly. So I don't want to get tons of extra sun because I'm probably going to get skin cancer eventually. So I get some sun, but not way too much. So I take some vitamin D just to make sure I'm not crazy deficient. So I take about 5,000 international units per day. Not every day actually, but like a few times per week. Usually from a brand called Pure Encapsulations, which is a pretty reliable, reputable brand in general. So I'm going to mention a few other products from them as well. So that was the first one. Vitamin D. So the second one is vitamin K2, better known as vitamin K1, which is involved in blood clotting, but vitamin K2 is involved in kind of calcium distribution. So it's related to that vitamin D I mentioned a moment ago. So of course with vitamin D, you absorb more calcium and kind of hold on to more of your calcium. But vitamin K2 helps you put it in the right places. It kind of helps you put less of that calcium in your arteries where you don't want it, with that like calcification where things get hard and don't work as well. But you want it in your bones, right? So that's kind of what vitamin K2 does in summary. And we don't get much of it in our American diet. So that's why I take a vitamin K2 supplement. Quick side note, I think calcium supplements are mostly overrated, but with the vitamin D and the vitamin K2, it is kind of a better way to go with that. So I use a vitamin K2 related product also from Pure Encapsulations called Synergy K. The next supplement I'm going to mention is fish oil. So of course that has a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, which in general, you kind of want to get enough omega-3 fatty acids relative to the omega-6 fatty acids because the omega-3 are kind of less inflammatory and the omega-6 are more inflammatory. That's kind of the general, big picture way to look at it. So in our American diet, we get tons and tons of omega-6 and very little omega-3 unless we go out of our way to change that. So unless I'm eating fish on a regular basis, which I do, but like on days when I'm not necessarily eating any fish, I'll usually take a little bit of fish oil just to try to kind of keep up with that. So I used to use a product called Nordic Naturals, and then more recently I checked on Consumer Labs, and there was a product from Costco, actually a Kirkland product, that rated pretty well based on their testing. So that's what I'm currently using. So That was pretty convenient, and it's relatively inexpensive. So that's fish oil. The next one is magnesium. Now, there's a lot I could say about magnesium, but I'll try to keep it simple. So most people are probably deficient, and like 70% of Americans are probably deficient in magnesium. That is what the estimates are. And magnesium does a lot of important jobs, many, 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 more than I could possibly list, including DNA repair. And getting enough magnesium or plenty of magnesium seems to be associated with better mood, like mental health and things like that, better heart function, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's a long list. And we actually use magnesium to treat a few different things in the ER too. So kind of goes to show that it has a lot of potential benefits. So you can't really measure your magnesium level very well. So unless you have a medical contraindication, it's probably worth trying to make sure you're getting plenty of magnesium. You can get some from leafy greens and other things in your diet, but most people don't get nearly enough. And so that's why I think it's usually worth taking some sort of supplement or trying to get more into your body somehow. So you can take it by mouth. And if you do that, if you take too much, it might cause diarrhea. But it's better if you take, the better forms tend to be magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate, which don't seem to cause as much loose stool. And another way to get magnesium is taking a bath with Epsom salt, because Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate and it gets absorbed through your skin. So I do the Epsom salt baths, but I also use, I've used a couple different products, but there's a magnesium glycinate from Pure Encapsulations, and then another one that comes in a powder form from Bulk Supplements. So I'll include a link to both of those on my list that I'm going to share as well. So that's magnesium. I think that's worthwhile for most people, again, unless you have a specific contraindication. The next supplement I wanted to mention is probiotics. So why probiotics? Well, we take too many antibiotics as a society, especially for coughs and colds, which rarely need antibiotics, but people often take them anyway. And so that kills the good bacteria in our gut, and then causes a bunch of downstream effects because there's a lot of emerging research that the bacteria in your gut, called your microbiome or gut flora, has many, many important effects. Affects your mental health, affects your metabolic health, like your blood sugar and things like that, and a bunch of other stuff. So it's kind of funny, those bacteria are actually important. It's like this symbiotic relationship, So especially if you've taken any antibiotics in your life, which I don't know, like 99% of people have, then it may be worth using a probiotic at least for a while and eating enough fiber and whatnot to kind of support it. But I use one called VSL3 because it's been researched and it seems to be really robust in terms of how much good bacteria it has in it. Most of the probiotics you find on the shelf at your pharmacy are probably not very good because that usually the bacteria is all dead already because it's been sitting out on the shelf too long. But the VSL3, they keep it refrigerated and they send it in an ice pack and stuff like that. So I use that product, and at one point I took some antibiotics and kind of had some constipation issues, and after I took that, it really made a big difference. TMI alert. I won't get into all the details. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good product if you're looking for a probiotic. Okay, I'm going to mention two other supplements and then one honorable mention, and then we'll be done. So one of those is collagen. So collagen is a type of protein, but it's sort of like already in the form that your body uses. And there's some research showing that like if you take it and then you exercise, or if you just take it, like sometimes it can kind of get into the cartilage or other connective tissue around your joints. And so it's probably good for joint health. Plus, most people don't get enough protein in their diet anyway. So it's like a win-win if you get a little extra protein, and then it might be helping your joints. So I've used a product from Great Lakes collagen, and then also I'm currently using one called Vital Proteins, which is on Amazon, but they also have it at Costco, just in case you like going to Costco. So I'll include links to both of those, but that's collagen. The next one is multivitamins. So a lot of people wonder if they should take a multivitamin, and I think the answer is yes, but maybe not every day, and here's why. First, like I said earlier, you want a reputable brand and all that stuff. But even if you get it from a good brand, a lot of times they don't have quite the right mix of things. So you get some things that are probably good, but you might get too much of certain things. So that's basically the issue with multivitamins. And the main vitamins that fall under that umbrella or fall into that issue, that in my experience from what I've kind of looked at, are vitamin A and vitamin E. So a lot of times there's too much preformed vitamin A and too much of just one form of vitamin E. So you don't really want preformed vitamin A. You want to get it from like beta carotene, and you don't really want just one form of vitamin E. You'd want a mix, but I haven't found any multivitamin that actually has a mix of the types of vitamin E like you'd get from a natural diet. So there are potential harms of getting too much of the wrong kinds of those. So that's why, as sort of like an insurance plan, I take a multivitamin, but I do not take it every day. I take it maybe 2 or 3 times a week. That's my personal approach. It's not based on any special research that shows that's the best approach, but it just kind of makes sense to me, because that way I'm not getting way too much of certain things, but I'm also making sure I'm not completely deficient in some of the other, long list of several other things that are in those multivitamins. So the product that I actually use for multivitamins is, again, from Pure Encapsulations. It's called One Multivitamin, O-N-E multivitamin. So I've mostly been talking about vitamins and minerals, but a quick honorable mention to a type of meal replacement shake that's probably the best one out there. So this particular one is called Health Code. It was designed by Dr. Ben Bickman, who's an expert on insulin. He was on episode 18 of my podcast. And I don't use it all the time, but I use it in a pinch when I need something quick, because it has a lot of good quality protein, healthy blend of fats, and it's really low net carbs. And so if you're going to ever use a meal replacement shake, that's probably a really good option. But I wouldn't use those all the time, just because food is better in general than any other supplements that you can use to try to replace it. So those are some of the supplements that I use. They're not the only ones that I ever use, but they're some of the ones that I use most frequently. So that's why I wanted to share them with you. And so my final thoughts on supplements are they're basically overrated. You're probably better off focusing on good quality food and kind of limiting the amount of supplements that you use. And if you do get them, you want to get them from a reputable brand or a product that's been tested with third-party testing to make sure it has the right ingredients and doesn't have the wrong ingredients. So I'll put a link to some of the supplements I mentioned in the video description, and also to the podcast where I went a little more in detail about some of these specific supplements and about supplements in general. And if you want to see my interview with Dr. Ben Bickman, who again was the one who designed those health code shakes and who's also an expert on insulin and a lot of things related to diabetes, you can find that interview right here. Actually, a really good interview, a lot of useful information about nutrition and exercise and so forth. So go ahead and check that out if you want, and I'll see you in the next video.